Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining. We'll go ahead and get started. We have two speakers in this session, so we're going to do about 25 minutes each, and then allow 10 minutes for questions at the end. Also, we'll give you all of our information. We can stick around, find us. You can email us, call us, all that good info as well. I'm going to go ahead and start just kind of with my family, why we're here. The biggest reason is the little man in the middle, Luca, 8 years old. He's in camp currently. You might have seen him running around. He'll be joining us here shortly at 5 o'clock as well. Luca, similar to a lot of you, was diagnosed at birth. We had a normal pregnancy, no issues whatsoever. Luca was born naturally, no C-sections, and then we also have a 14-year-old here in 2 weeks. So we were in the hospital, and there were a little bit of concerns. Oh, he's not crying as much. He's not moving a lot. But essentially, they dismissed us. 2 days later, we went home. So as we realized a few days into it being home, as Luca was losing more weight than normal, things weren't going well. We went back. A lot of the doctors and therapists are hard on my wife. It's kind of like, do you know what you're doing? The breastfeeding, what have you? Like, we've done this before. We have another child. Something is not right. So anyway, needless to say, we spent an additional 3 weeks. That actually was a big deal, but they got us back in the NICU because we had already left the hospital. Genetic testing, you name it. Prader-Willi syndrome is what we got. When they first told me, what do? You Google it. I'm like, how do you spell it? What is it? Which is what they tell you not to do. But that's kind of where we're at. Had to be prepared. So anyways, Luca is doing extremely well today. We like to talk about not PWS, but what he really likes to do, which is swimming, horse riding, and hippotherapy was brought up. It's been a huge initiative that he enjoys, coloring, playing. He's very social. He's always the life of the party. Everybody likes him. At school, everywhere we go. We also, Alex, almost 14. He's our soccer player. He thinks he's going pro. We travel the country for him to play soccer. So you might see, earlier he was with the soccer ball this morning in the breakfast area. My wife happens to be an occupational therapist. We didn't design it that way, but it's been extremely helpful over the last 8 years or so. So I call her Vice President of Operations at our household. Things would not be functioning the way they are if it wasn't for her. I spent, and it was in my bio, I was with Target for 15, 16 years at director level, running stores all over the place. Really enjoyed it. Luca inspired me to really switch careers. 8 years ago, the first year was rough. We're kind of trying to grasp what does this look like in terms of medically and travel and growth hormone and approvals and all the surgeries and everything happening, but then how do we properly plan for this financially? I quickly realized not a lot of people do special needs planning, and a lot of the advice is just general. Open a 529 plan, save a lot, put money aside, good luck. So that's kind of become a niche and specialty of mine, and switching gears and have a charter special needs designation. In my spare time, I feel like we're chauffeuring everyone around, love to travel as well. So in terms of just a few statistics, and I don't know how easy this is to see and not to scare anyone, but the bottom line through all of these, and you guys can look through it, is that a lot of people are just concerned, do we have enough for retirement? How do we plan for ourselves? How do we plan for our loved one with special needs? What does long-term care look like? Would we have enough? And then all of us are hoping that our children would outlive us. So what does that look like for them, for us? Towards the bottom, you can see here, and we'll talk in detail. A lot of people don't have a financial plan. A lot of people don't have a will. Most people don't know what a special needs trust is. So we're going to try to address and demystify some of those concepts today. This is just a disclaimer. Always when we talk to families, there's no magic formula or age. It's never too soon to start planning. It's amazing coming here, just seeing, we have babies and seeing the G-tubes and what have yous, and we have 40-year-olds and everything and anything else in between. So I always tell clients, there's no judgment. If you haven't started, your kid is 10, 12, 20, it doesn't matter, or some are very assertive. 3 months in, we're already doing all kinds of stuff. So just kind of keep that into perspective. You don't have to do everything at once, so we kind of take it in stages, but we have to start somewhere. This meeting, and congrats to all of you for being here, is just remembering that there is a community. There's so many Facebook groups and chapters and just different support networks and PWSA that can help you along the way. We had in a couple of the sessions yesterday, it was brought up as, again, you're not alone. There's people that have paved the way, that are 20 years in, 30 years in. And yes, things are a lot different, in a lot of ways better, simpler. Advancements in medicine, technology, there's, some of our kiddos that are younger. Mine is 8, but some of you have a 2-year-old, what have you, or just a baby. Things are going to be better, but you don't have to discover America. Someone can help you along the way. What I'm going to touch on a little bit is the importance of having a team. A lot of the presentations are centered around medical, therapy, all of those things, IEPs, school. We have a team in all those areas, so when it comes to financial, legal, we want to do the same. We're going to talk a little bit, what is a special needs plan, what are trusts, ABLE accounts. So in terms of, I call them the 3 pillars when we talk about how do we build a team. We want to have a financial professional, government benefits specialist, and an attorney, someone who specializes in this area of planning. A lot of times, when I meet a family, we kind of talk about who are we missing from this chart. If we need a referral, how do we fill in the gaps? And we take it from there. So in terms of special needs plan, we kind of look at a lot of times when we talk about retirement, we keep things in silo, if you would, as we talk about how are mom and dad doing, what does retirement look like, what are our goals, planning all of that. Well, in our cases, we have our loved one, and the questions really come up, and there's been sessions designed to address that, is where are they going to live? Are they going to be home? Are we looking at some sort of hybrid or group home solution? Are we looking at an apartment with a caregiver? So those are the kinds of things that we want to start thinking about at some point. What is that going to look like? What is that going to cost? Mom and dad at some point are not going to be here, are going to be older, they may need care themselves. So how do we put those two together? The social component on the bottom, it's been brought up through a few of the presentations, but it's huge. A lot of times, yesterday I went to, and some of you were there, just the different options and models. A lot of times, there's a huge benefit of our child staying at home at 18, at 20, 22, 24. But there are also disadvantages. It could be very isolating. So what activities do they partake outside of the home, or can we get them in a different environment but still be very supportive? So we want to start thinking about that. So in terms of how do we pay for this, or what's available, or benefits, again, this is probably a refresher for some of you that have older children, but for newer families. And this is the way it's designed, is the spectrum is so broad. When I think of special needs planning, there's kind of a 0 to 8 to 10, and then there's 10 to 18, and then 18 to adulthood. So there's different priorities and how we think of it. So Social Security, it has a couple of different buckets, SSI, SSDI. So most of you are probably familiar. Some of your kids may be on those programs. Medicaid, different vocational services, public schools, veteran benefits. Those are kind of the most common benefits that are available out there that we talk about. A lot of times, families, and we're in the same position, are not familiar. They just don't know, well, where do I start, or what's available, or how do I qualify? So we'll talk a little bit about that. For a lot of families, I think the first part is, well, we make too much money, or what have you, or we tried it. There's nothing available to us, so we give up. So we'll talk a little bit about what does that look like over time and how to get benefits. So Social Security income, also known as SSI, just a few different components we'll walk through. So child under 18, how does the administration determine? Basically, they look at what is the parent's income, assets, what's the household size, and that's how they determine eligibility. Unless you're under poverty levels, you don't qualify. So that's the part we're talking about. For most families, you cannot get it. We'll talk then about what are waiver programs and how do we qualify for that as well. At age 18, when the child basically reaches adulthood, they become their own adults in the eyes of the government, so they can qualify. Mom and dad are irrelevant. It doesn't matter what kind of income, what kind of assets we have, the child can qualify. The caveat there in the middle is we have to have less than $2,000 in assets. So how do we start the planning early? Whether that's 529 accounts, bank accounts, inheritance, things of that nature, we cannot have in our child's name. So again, if you have a little one, if you don't get benefits today, just think at age 18, that can change. The last bullet point there is when mom and dad retire, we can get an additional benefit. So it's a combination of SSI with SSDI, what is known as the bump up. A lot of families are not aware of it, but essentially your child can qualify for up to 50% of your benefit. You might be thinking, well, why is this important? How does this matter? Or we're just cash flowing, we're paying for everything. We want to make sure that families are entitled. I mean, that's a couple $100 a month, or it could be in the mid, $1,000 or $1,500, depending. We want to make sure that we're getting that. For those of you that are not familiar, how much are we talking about? The number on the bottom, but it's raised quite a bit over the last 3-4 years. It used to be like $770, $814, $880. Last year had a pretty good increase just with inflation. So $914 is the maximum amount for Social Security Administration. We'll get to questions here in a little bit. Thank you. So a lot of parents, we can maximize that amount. For some families, there's a deduction for rent if your child lives at home. So some of you might be used to getting $500 or $600 depending on the state and where you live. What I talked about when we retire, so it's based on mom and dad's history. So a lot of times we'll run a calculation. Does it make sense for mom to retire first or dad, based on who made more, based on ages? Because we can lump that benefit to the higher earner. So an example would be, say, if I am 65 tomorrow and I'm getting $3,000 a month, what we're saying is that my son can get up to $1,500, and that doesn't impact my benefit. So that's something that, again, when you're doing traditional planning, is not always addressed, but we want to make sure that we're doing it, in a good fashion and kind of putting some methodology to maximize the benefit there. So outside of benefits, government benefits, now let me go back a little bit. In terms of so waiver programs, those of you, okay, thank you. Oh my goodness. So in terms of waiver programs, what the waiver does, it waives the income and asset requirement. Depending on the state that you live, you might be able to get Medicaid, but not necessarily SSI, but that's something that you could explore in your state. So outside of government benefits, special needs trust and able accounts, those are the two most common tools that we private fund essentially for our children. I'm gonna let Lisa talk a little bit more about the special needs trust from a legal perspective, but essentially it allows you to preserve government benefits. A couple, things I had on here is you want to make sure that a qualified attorney is doing it. A lot of times people are trying to save money, go to LegalZoom.com or use their brother-in-law who does different law or what have you. We want to make sure it's done right. And then in a lot of instances, there's a concern. We don't have anyone in our family that can be the trustee or everyone's aging or what have you. You could use third-party companies, banks, that type of thing. We leverage a lot of life insurance to fund special needs trust. So upon death, it's tax-free, has a huge benefit. And the last piece that's really critical of the special needs trust is that there's no concerns if there's assets remaining. If your child or adult happens to pass away, nothing is lost per se, stays in the family. Able accounts, people know about able accounts? Not a lot, okay. So able accounts, they're coming up on 10 years. It was children with Down syndrome. Parents went to DC and said, where do we save money? How do we get around this $2,000 limit? and it's based on the 529 platform. The ABLE accounts came up. Basically, it allows you to save beyond that $2,000 threshold. As long as the disability has occurred before age 26, you can open one up. We don't even manage ABLE accounts. I send people to the ABLE NRC, which is the National Resource Center. You can pick your state. Takes 10 minutes, very easy to do. When Luca was born, we opened a 529 account. We grew it a little bit, and then it's kind of like, well, 529 accounts, and I'll get to it here next, is it's only deemed for education. I don't know, based on diagnosis, cognition, if we're going to use it, where it's going to go. We shifted it to an ABLE account. Couple of things on here, ABLE accounts, you could only do up to $17,000 a year. So that's kind of the gifting guidelines, and it's strictly cash. With the special needs trust, we can do real estate, millions of dollars if we had them, life insurance, businesses, anything else can go to a special needs trust. A question always arises, well, what do we do? What's best for our family? And it's the combination of the two works really well. We have a special needs trust and we have an ABLE account. Periodically, we use the ABLE account for out-of-pocket expenses, travel, whatever it may come up. The special needs trust is more long-term and has different assets designated to it. So that's the best way to think of it. I have it on here. The ABLE accounts are good. I mean, even this is a good example. If I wanted to charge Lucas plane ticket to come to Florida for this convention, I can use the ABLE account. If I want to take him to Disney World tomorrow, I can use the ABLE account. With a 529 plan, I can't do that. Any other expenses that you may have. A lot of times, I mentioned he loves his hippotherapy. If I wanted to use the ABLE account, we can do that. Let's see. In terms of a lot of times, and you guys I can send you, if you're interested further, I can send you an email with just further information of how do we build plans, what does that look like, how do we forecast costs for your child, and go from there. For the purposes of time, I'm going to switch it over to Lisa, and we'll go into the legal component and the trust. Thank you.
Is it working now? Yep. Okay. So I am too short. If I'm standing here, you cannot even see me. So I'm going to try to do this and have Emma advance my screen. So I'm Lisa Thornton. If you want to click through to our family. So this is my family. I have a husband and I have 5 children. Kate is our youngest, and she will be 20 next week. And we've been planning her birthday all year, as you can imagine. I've been an attorney for the last 32 years, and I've done a lot of things, but like Ivilo, I've kind of switched in the last 20 years and really focused on helping families who have children with special needs and working with different projects. I've been the president of the Utah Prader-Willi Syndrome Association for 17 years. You would think we would have someone else by now, but I served on the national board for 6 years. Some of the things that I'm pretty proud of is we've created 2 lifelong college-like programs in Utah. We've raised like about $10 million to create 2 campuses, and so our individuals with disabilities can go to classes and have mostly fine arts classes like dance and music and art and theater and hands-on science and creative writing, and we do full musicals every year, and so we've really loved doing that. We've also done a lot of work at the legislature that I will talk about later. But the reason I'm here is there's our Kate when she was about 6. Does that look familiar to any of you? They like to dress up, don't they? Does that look familiar to you? Okay, do you want to do the next one? And there's Kate now. Maybe go to the next one. So notice the missionaries from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints have been here. They've been here helping with all of the children's programs, and they've been coming since 2011. Can you imagine the thousands of hours that they've volunteered here? So we couldn't hold this conference without them. If we had to pay people to come and do the work that they're doing, it would be way too expensive for all of us to be here. So tell them thank you, and better yet, when you're out in your community and you see the missionaries, stop and tell them what the missionaries did here in Orlando, and tell them thank you. They give up 2 years of their lives, and they spend their own money to do this, and they volunteer wherever they're called in the world. So while I get to talk to you, it's fun to just say some things that you don't get to say to everybody, but I am just thrilled to be here with people who are like me. Whenever I meet any of you, it's just like we have this immediate bond because we have the same experience, the same life-changing experience. When my husband and I first came to this conference 17 years ago, we both split up and took notes just furiously and overwhelmed, but we got on the plane and took out our notes, and in that 5-hour trip home, we made a list of everything from, we really need to check Kate to get a scoliosis screening, which we didn't even know what that was, but we knew we needed to do it, to things that we wanted to see happen in Utah. Like, we didn't know that states had medical clinics. And so we wrote down just these impossible goals, like start a medical clinic and raise money so we can do some of the things we were hearing about from all of you that we could possibly do. So 2 years later, we had accomplished all 76 things. I mean, this is a place to come, to hear ideas, to dream. We had no idea that we could do those kinds of things or that it could even happen. So hopefully you are here, you're talking to people, you're getting their information, the other families, the doctors are all very approachable here, and you get their contact information so you can have the ability to get help when you need it. That's part of the perks of coming to the conference. Plus, write down all these ideas. If someone says something and it triggers something in your head, write it down and go after it. Help in your states, help get families together and do this. So the other thing I'll say, just wasting everyone's time, but we have a wonderful grant that we wrote in Utah to get security equipment for our families. We did a survey and none of our families had adequate security. So Christopher Rich is here, and he's our fabulous intern that's taking over that project. And so we are purchasing equipment for our families and installing it and getting it ready. And just even, so if you come to our booth, you will see a video of like a self-locking fridge. You hit the code and the fridge opens, like even the French door fridge, and then you shut it and it locks itself. And that has just changed our lives. So stop by the booth and get some information on that. Okay. Whoops, I guess we had a slide for that. And all of these slides, by the way, they're going to be coming to you, and then all of the recordings are going to be on the website, so you will have all this information. So let's get on to our topic. So as parents of children with Prader-Willi syndrome, we all hope that we can live forever, but that our kids will die one day before we do. That's my goal, is that she will, I will be able to take care of her. That's what we all worry about. But that's not likely going to happen. Typically, we are so good at taking care of our kids. We go to 1 million therapy appointments. We research, we study, we figure everything out. We do everything we can to take care of them, but we don't do any legal planning. Most people have not done any legal planning or financial planning. And so we really leave our children in a lurch. Okay, we can go on to the next one. So as parents of a child with Prader-Willi syndrome, we need legal documents in place that will protect our child and protect ourselves. And keep in mind that this is just a beginning point, that you'll be doing estate planning through the years. But here's the list of the things that you need to get into place. So first, to protect our child with special needs, we need a special needs trust and letters of guardianship. So you should set up a special needs trust, which is also called a third-party supplemental needs trust. You should get that set up at any point, and preferably sooner rather than later. This will protect your child's potential future benefits, as Ivilo said. So if they ever have more than $2,000 and you're going to apply for a waiver, if you're going to apply for supplemental security income, if you're applying for Medicaid, if they deem that your child has, like if you have an account and it's got money in their name, or if you pass away and your child inherits from you, which they will, then they will be disqualified from benefits. So a trust protects your child's potential benefits, the assets that are going to come from you as parents. Also, this trust allows you to, for your child to get a few $100s extra a month. So let's say you pass away and you have this special needs trust set up. You know, sometimes Medicaid doesn't cover your dental some years in your state. Some years they don't cover vision. Some years maybe they'll need an extra something. But if you have this trust set up, then that would be a great thing to have a few $100s a month coming out to provide for them. Because even if they are getting supplemental security income and benefits, it's not enough for most of your kids to live the kind of life that you want them to live. So it's a great way to do that. Okay. So don't make the mistake of leaving money to a sibling. This happens all the time with families that I meet with. They're like, well, I'm just going to leave money to Emma, who's Kate's sister right here, and let her take care of Kate. So there's big pitfalls to this because first of all, sorry, we're talking siblings. No, yes. No, to the child. Sorry, I'm on the wrong slide. So we don't want to leave money to the child with special needs because they could squander it, they can lose it, so that's not going to work. No, that was sibling. I'm just getting confused. I'm looking too many places. I should look right here at my screen. So if you leave money to a sibling, then oftentimes, like let's say they get divorced. Where does that money go? Let's say their child tries to apply for financial aid to get into college. That money could potentially be used against them. So don't make the mistake of leaving it to the child, or I think the sibling is next, to the sibling for those reasons. Medicaid knows about special needs trusts, Social Security, supplemental security income. They all know about special needs trusts, and they ask about them. And so it doesn't really do you any service to hide that money with a sibling. In fact, it's dangerous to do that. Okay, so a third-party special needs trust is better to be its own document, and it should stand alone, which simply means it's just a document separate. But a lot of people, a lot of attorneys will put them inside your will, or they'll put them inside your revocable trust, and it's just paragraphs in there. That's what that means. So it's better to have it be a standalone document. And the reason is that this type of document will allow other people to leave money there. So if grandparents wanted to leave your child money, then they could leave it to that trust. And that's kind of an uncomfortable conversation, but you should say something like, you know, if you were going to leave money, don't surprise us because that will disqualify our child from benefits. I'll show you how to do it. So, you know, those conversations are uncomfortable, but you should have that conversation. Also, this standalone document allows the caretaker to have instant access. Like they can, you know, you could have a bank account set up and money going in there, and then they could be able to have instant access. Okay. So who should be the trustee of the special needs trust? This is usually the person that would act in your shoes, just like if they were the parent. This will be the person that decides, you know, how much money they get and when they get it. A lot of people choose a sibling to be the trustee of that trust. Like if I chose Emma to be Kate's trustee, it's great because no one loves Kate more than Emma, but every dollar she gives Kate is a dollar she won't get. Because typically the siblings will inherit when the child passes away. And Emma would give it all to her. She's a great person and a loving heart, but it kind of puts her in an awkward position because it is money that the other siblings won't get. So sometimes it's a good idea to look at a corporate trustee. So at your bank or your credit union, they'll have people who are professionals, and they invest money a lot better than maybe Emma would, as smart as she is. Maybe they're better at investing. So you do pay a small fee for their services, but sometimes their ability to invest and the ability to take out the factor of the sibling issue, sometimes that is a great situation to have. And then you have two people taking care of instead of just one. Okay. So this is probably Vilo's area better, but having money to fund a trust and when to fund a trust, we'll kind of go through this quickly. Most parents fund a trust upon their death. And for most parents, I think that's probably a good way to look at it, because you should build your family assets and work hard to get what you need to, versus funding a trust and having to file taxes on that trust and worrying about a separate document. And there will be a lot of slides and information that you can look at. And then the next one is, some people like to fund the special needs trust during their lifetime. If they have a lot of money, there's a lot of issues there. Can you go forward one more? Some people like the security of having everything all just locked up in place and that bank account's open and the money's there. Sometimes grandparents like to put a lot of money there, so that's a good time to do that. Okay, and then how to fund. This again is his area, and I don't know a lot about this, but there's a lot of things that you can do to fund the trust. It's just an empty bucket unless you have something pointing toward that, so that's something you should think about. The next one. So there's calculators online that you can use. There's all kinds of information to give you insight as to how much money would be beneficial to have. And that's Kate at homecoming, the cute guy that asked her out. It was fun. So the next one, I did this for our family. I set up a timeline kind of for 2 generations about when things are going to happen for us. And Ivilo again talked about a lot of this. So you might want to look at something like this and see where you're going to be at your life when SSI is going to kick in for your child and what that means, and when you're going to get guardianship, and then when you're going to retire and potentially get supplemental security disability income and change from a Medicaid, Medicare combination instead of just Medicaid. It doesn't what? I'm never going to retire and I'm never going to die, apparently. Okay.
How does Sid feel about that 10-year difference?
Yeah. Guys, they get one little thing and they kick off. I mean, we all know that. Women live a lot longer. It's true. Okay. So that kind of sums up just a general thing about special needs trust. Just as a final note, I love ABLE accounts and I think there's a great place for them, but I think you do need a special needs trust. And we'll talk about that in a minute more, but just plan that you're going to get a special needs trust, okay? Because you need one. Let's see. So I am willing to email you a template for a special needs trust, and I can send you one that's within a will, or I can send you a standalone document with language that your attorney should put in there, like this estate, this money goes to the trustee of the third-party supplemental needs trust for Kate Thornton. I mean, I'll give you that kind of language. So if you'll email me and you can write that down or in the slides. I know they were supposed to have the slides in the app, but they're going to email and they're going to put it up on the website. But if you want to take a picture of my email, I'm more than willing. You can even email me right now if you want to get it done. And then if you reach under your chair, there might be something there. Is there something there? Oh, there we go. So this person wins a $25 Amazon card, but you guys all won like a $2,000 special needs trust, so don't feel bad about that. So if you can't afford an attorney to do these documents, you could do what I'm giving you and have you take this to an attorney and say, look, I've got it done. Will you just review it and make sure this looks good to you? The Special Needs Alliance is a good thing to Google and find an attorney in your area that really understands special needs planning so you get the right kind of special needs trust. So I'm not your attorney in this process, but I'm happy to give you a template to help you out. Okay. So again, just a quick note about ABLE accounts. I think they're wonderful and there's a great place for them. So these are the positives of having an ABLE account. And then the next slide, I think, is super important to understand. Like, many states are changing this, but still in Utah, once your child with special needs dies, Medicaid can come in and take dollar for dollar anything that they've given your child out of that trust. So if you've put a lot of your money in there, then potentially that could go to Medicaid. But if you put your money steered to a special needs trust, then Medicaid can't touch it. But it is a good investment tool, and it's a good way to spend money on things for your child. So it's kind of a mix, but I wouldn't put a ton of money in there, especially as they're getting older. That doesn't make sense to me to do. Sure.
In terms of, I didn't get to it, but in terms of the, when it comes down to the ABLE account, it's a Medicaid payback provision. When you go to the ABLE NRC, you can research your state and it'll tell you if you have it or not. We're in the state of Kansas. We had the Medicaid payback provision a few years ago. It's repealed. There's a movement to get those off. These accounts are not meant to be, these accounts are not meant to be huge. It was mentioned in both of our slides, but you could only grow it up to 100,000 if you're collecting Social Security. One thing I tell parents as well, even if the worst happens and your little one or older one is gone, you can use the ABLE account first for funeral expenses, last-minute expenses. You can take the whole family to Disney World to celebrate, whatever that looks like. So there's a way to repurpose some of the money. That's not what we're putting it aside for, but there's some tools. And then the last piece in terms of taxes with the ABLE accounts, like we chose the Kansas because I get a state tax deduction. So for putting up to, for a married filing joint, up to $6,000 annually, we get a couple $100 from the state of Kansas. But you don't have to choose your own state. So if you live in Utah, but you like the Texas plan, you can join that plan. There's not a state tax deduction. Maybe it doesn't have the Medicaid payback. So there's a lot of nuances to it, but there's ways around it if that's what you're interested. What's that? Yeah. You can jot it down, but it's ABLE NRC, which is the nationalresource.org. And yeah, you can go by state. You can click on whatever, Texas, Utah, Nevada. It will tell you, here's how it's invested, what are the minimums, the maximums, fees, Medicaid payback provision. Towards the bottom, it will tell you yes or no.
Okay, nope, you're great. So let's switch to guardianship. So guardianship is a legal proceeding where the court determines that your child with Prader-Willi syndrome is unable to manage life decisions because of incapacity. And the court issues a document called letters of guardianship, and you use those documents to show physicians and government agencies to prove that you have the authority to make decisions for your child and help them in their life. So once your child reaches 18, the laws in every state considers them an adult. And this has some pretty serious implications for you. So insurance companies won't talk to you. Doctors won't talk to you under HIPAA laws. Police typically won't look for your child. Like in our state, they don't look for 72 hours if they're an adult and there's no guardianship. We had an adult with Prader-Willi syndrome that was 29 that took off, and they didn't look for 72 hours, and she was gone for 9 weeks. So this is really a serious thing. We have one parent found out that a man was picking up their child from the group home every weekend and taking him, and they're like, she's an adult, she can go where she wants. And so they had to get guardianship to prevent those kinds of things from happening. Okay. I like to add a third or fourth person, not just the parents, if you can, because when the parents pass away, you would have to go back to court to take care of that. We've only got a few more minutes, so I also love for you to try to get full guardianship, or plenary guardianship is what they call it, not partial. Most courts prefer partial guardianship, but I've never helped a family with Prader-Willi syndrome where I would suggest a partial guardianship. You want your child to do everything they can do, and you want to have them fly as high as they can go, but you want an awfully strong security net underneath them. So if they fall or if something happens, that you have the legal rights to do that. And as I say guardianship, some states call it just conservatorship, like California, but guardianship, in our state at least, covers the financial and the guardianship over the person, like the rights over them. Another thing is, one more slide. This is a great area for legislative work if you have a little bit of an itch to help in your state. This is a simple, low-hanging fruit kind of area to really get some work done. We got the filing fee changed from $360 to $35, which isn't a huge big deal, but it was so easy to do. And so it has made a big difference for our families. We got it so you don't have to have an attorney for your child if they have less than $20,000. So that saves families, $1,500 to $2,000 to get this done. And we also got the courts to put the forms on the website in an auto-populated system, so parents can get guardianship done for $55 in Utah now, if they use both of those systems. So that's a really great thing. Let's just go through the rest of this quickly, and you'll get all these. So substitutions, if you don't get guardianship, which I don't recommend, but for sure get their own power of attorney, healthcare directives, and their estate planning if you're not going to get guardianship. Okay, we've talked about supplemental security income. If you get denied appeal, our national website has lots of great resources on that. I've never heard of anyone not getting it on appeal. So often you'll get denied, but just appeal. Let's see, Medicaid comes with it. So if you're approved for supplemental security income, you automatically qualify for Medicaid, but some families forget you have to apply. So get on the website and apply. I've talked to families who have had SSI for 6 years and still, they're like, you can get Medicaid? You're like, yeah, you have to apply. And that's medical insurance for the rest of their life. So that's super important. So we're just gonna go through the next slides, and you'll get these on, through an email or however they're going to give us the slides. But we talked about what a child with Prader-Willi syndrome needs, which is their special needs trusts and guardianship. But now for parents, you should have a power of attorney, a durable power of attorney. You should have, let's just scroll through these, and then you should have a medical health care directive. You can Google Advanced Healthcare Directive in the name of your state, and you'll be able to find the forms for that and complete that yourself if you want to. You should have a will that sets forth the guardian of your minor children. And if you have a child with Prader-Willi syndrome, you can say in there, I want my guardian to be so-and-so, but that isn't the legal process that you go through to get the formal guardianship in place. Just know that. Let's see. We can keep going. You should have your own trust if you don't want your children to have to go through a probate process. You should have a trust that passes your estate just directly to your children so you don't have to go through that probate process, which there's some from California in here and it's a nightmare. So I would for sure have one if you're from there. Utah's a little bit easier, but still it's a great thing to have. And I can answer questions about that. If you want to email me or call you, I can answer questions about these kinds of things. And then I think Ivilo is willing, and I also have letters of intent or life care plan templates, which are really great. They're not legal documents, but they're documents that list things like, when I shower Kate, I sing this song to her, and she lets me wash her hair when we do that. Or these are the 16 doctors that she goes to with their phone numbers. So what I like to do is keep the document open, and then when I'm doing something, I think, oh, if somebody had to take over taking care of Kate, they would want to know this. So I put it on there, and then that would be a document that you could put in to your legal documents. So if someone did take over guardianship and need to help them right away, that they would have that. And then the last slide is, one more, is you should keep your documents updated maybe every January. Open up what you have on your big plan and say, is this really what we want? And see, it's easy to make these changes. You don't file these documents in court, they're yours. And so you can make the changes you need. And anyway, so I guess we'll take questions.
Yeah, we will take questions. I know we want to leave ample time for that, so. If you have a question, please raise your hand and I will.
I'll send these around, one on each side. You guys can take a look, but this is a little bit of our planning approach, how we help families. At the back, there's a letter of intent that we just talked about, but kind of gives you an idea. I have this in a digital format, so a PDF. If you guys send me an email, I'll send it to you along with some of these materials as well. But you can kind of take a look and pass it down if it's of interest.
And again, if you send me an email, I'll send you the template for the special needs trust and language.
Yeah, so just a quick question for both the special needs trust and the guardianship. If you set them up in one state and then your family moves states, do you need to totally redo them, or do they apply in the other state?
guardianship is, I mean, it's kind of technical, like, some people would still honor it. Like if you went to a doctor, they may say, okay, you're the guardian. But many agencies would not. And so typically when families move, it's a good idea to get your guardianship transferred. In Utah, it's much easier to start again because of the changes we've made. For $55, you can just start again and get it done in Utah, and it's quick. But some states make you transfer and work with both courts, and it's a hassle. Your special needs trust, typically you're okay. But again, you would want to just be checking, like if you live in Louisiana, all bets are off. Their laws are nuts. But most states, you can move, states and do decently with your estate planning.
And if you've already done the process, it's more of an amendment, so it may be a couple $100 instead of $3,000 to $4,000 to review it and make sure it's compliant with that state.
Yeah.
Can families from outside of the U.S. Fund the special needs trust, and what's the process for that?
That gets a little bit tricky. Depends on their status, resident, non-resident, do they pay taxes, that type of thing. But yeah, there are ways to do that as well.
Hi, thank you. 2 questions. Can you take money out of a special needs trust at any point without penalty? Or is there a certain timeline where money needs to be withdrawn without penalty? And second question, are there any states, particular ABLE accounts that you would recommend or that you really like? Thank you.
So in terms of the special needs trust, yes, you can pull the money out. There are some restrictions when you're receiving government benefits. So if you're already on SSI and Medicaid, that money is meant for food and shelter. The government requires it, so you can't use it to subsidize rent or food or those types of things. How we get around that is families can move money from the special needs trust to the ABLE account, and the ABLE account can help pay for that. So that's kind of one way to do that. What was the second question?
Are there any states, particular ABLE accounts that you recommend?
Virginia is really good, very, very low fees. Massachusetts is good. It's really, a lot of those accounts they're not as aggressive as what a traditional brokerage or investment account would be, and they're managed by the state. So you're not necessarily going to get, if you're going after large returns, what you might do on your own or with an advisor type of thing. But they're also, the good news there is that we don't want those accounts having a 20% deviation next month. They're really meant for children with special needs or adults, and we may need the money sooner than later. But there's options there as well. So you can select, how aggressive or conservative you would like to be.
And the one point again is why I like to typically have parents fund the special needs trust upon their death is they have full access to their money to do what they want to for their child. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
How I explain it to families when we first meet, and it's kind of just as an overview, but think of the ABLE account as a checking account and the special needs trust like a long-term savings account. So the ABLE account, it's liquid, we can touch it. A lot of states we can get a debit card, we can be connected to your bank. It's very easy, we can get to it. The special needs trust is more long-term assets that we want to fund there. Most of us, in this room, we're thriving, we're helping our children, we're funding everything, we're cash flowing it, so there's no really need for me today. We do have a special needs trust, but it's not funded. There's no need, it has its own EIN number, taxes, gets complicated. There's no reason to go through that. We can use the ABLE or other vehicles, but long term, to Lisa's point, it has to be there. And then you have to educate your whole family, grandparents, aunts, uncles. A lot of people mean well. Like in our case, everybody loves Luca. He has aunts, uncles, California, what have you. The last thing we want is a large check showing up with his name on it. So you kind of have to tell people, put the trust, or if you're ready today, there's other ways through the ABLE, what have you, if you like to contribute.
Thank you very much. You mentioned corporate trusts and the banks. What about these pooled special needs trusts?
So the pooled special needs trusts are generally, if we have lower income, so if we don't have large accounts, life insurance benefits. So a lot of times, we don't recommend them unless you really don't have a large estate. If you're less than $10,000, $20,000, that's when they work well. So a lot of families will work through the ARC or pooled trust and get something set up, but it's really, if mom and dad are aging, maybe they've used up long-term cares, and there's not a lot left there. So it's a good way to still fund things, but if you have a larger estate, in most cases, doesn't make sense.
Are there anything for the low-income families? Or is there anything we should know about, warnings or anything to go with these pooled trusts?
No, I mean, for a lower income, not a lot of assets, it would work perfect. And then if there's additional funds, or we have some, I would use the ABLE account because we can get up to $100,000 there. So you have the legal piece with the pooled, and you have whatever funds we have into the ABLE account.
I'm over here. Are there any, can you hear me? Are there any lists of attorneys that you would recommend going to that specialize in people with special needs? Is there anywhere we can go to find that?
It was on Lisa's slides, but it's the Special Needs Alliance. Again, you
Okay.
can look it up, and you can view by state. So
Okay.
that's always a good starting point. As I've referred clients to different states, now I'm kind of figuring out who's responsive, who charges what, type of thing, so you can kind of drill down. And also tell families, it's like, we don't get anything, or it doesn't matter to me who you use. So if there's 4 names on there, call them all. Interview them, how long does it take, what do they charge, when can they see you? So you get to make that decision, but that's the best place to start.
Yeah.
So my aunt, my aunt has an account for my son who has Prader-Willi, and he can't touch it till he's 21. So that would be at the end of the year. I don't know what to do because he has Social Security, and she has like dementia, and she can't go and change it. So what do I do? I know
Is it a
that's
bank account, or?
Yes, he can't do anything with it till he's 21. He can't. I mean, he can't even get to it. But it's in her name and his name, and it's gonna be a lot because she's been saving ever since he was born.
Yeah. So, I mean, if the amount is less than 17,000, the first answer is always we go to the ABLE account, and then it's per calendar year. So say if we had $30,000, we can put 17 tomorrow, the other 13 January 1st. We'll do that. If it's a larger amount, the best way, I mean, you're going to have to hire an attorney. So we talked a little bit today about a third-party special needs trust. So then there's what is called a first party, which is a self-settled trust. So that would be money directly left to your son. It will cost a little bit of money. They will do the paperwork. But basically, the first-party special needs trust can also protect benefits. So that would be, it would cost a little bit of funding and work, but
So
The other point too is if she knows that she has a bank account and she knows her nephew, she could make a change. She has capacity to make a change. She doesn't have to have full mental capacity. So
Okay.
that's another option too, is to change the account.
So does she need to just change the name to, I mean, just to go to the bank and change the name is what you're saying?
depending on your relationship, the easiest thing to do is she can change it in your name.
Yeah.
If she can change it to your name,
That's the best
and then
thing.
you control the whole piece there as well. That would be the easiest, best,
Yes.
most cost-effective.
Okay, and
We
then
do
I
that
can put it in the
on Monday.
ABLE account.
If she
Then I can
really-
just transfer it to an ABLE account once it's in
Or
my
leave it
name.
in your
Or you
name.
would manage it, you could do a lot of different things from there, but it's in your name, benefits are protected, no issues.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Is there any reason you wouldn't go for guardianship for your child with Prader-Willi? Any reason at all that you can think of not to
Not
do
in
that?
Utah.
Okay.
I mean, there's no liability to the parents unless there's like egregious negligence. I mean, if they go do something crazy, there's not going to come anything back to you. If the state needs to take care of them and you turn the child like over to the state to do that, just having guardianship isn't going to change that. So in my mind, I see no negatives
No,
and I see
okay.
a whole lot of positives.
And are they part of the process? I'm not familiar with the process. I have a 16-year-old, so I'm just preparing. Are they part of that process?
Your son?
Yeah.
It depends on the state. Again, every state
Michigan.
is different. In Utah, we have hearings by Zoom, kind of, the WebEx, and the judge will say, "Is Kate there?" And he may say something to her, he may not.
Okay.
That's as much as she's a part of the process in our state. In some states, the judges, or in smaller rural areas in Utah, the judge will talk to them and say, are you sure you want this? If this isn't what you want, will you come back and tell me? Will you, I mean, it just depends on which court you're in and what jurisdiction and what they do.
Okay.
Thanks, it's very useful information. So we have a 19-year-old who is on the border. Question with guardianship, can they still vote?
Yes.
Oh, great. Second question, can you have more than one ABLE account?
On the ABLE account, it's only one, goes by the Social Security number. You can have
Okay.
multiple people funding it, but it's only, goes your son or daughters, you put the Social Security number, that's their account.
I have a son that's 43. I've never had guardianship. He does have his own will and living will and things like that. I have power of attorney for him. I have power of attorney for health care. And I guess I'm not aware of what problems I could have if I don't have guardianship, but I have those other items.
Well, I think we talked about a few of the stories. I think it depends on your son and the access that people have to him. But, you know, one of our folks, you know, they met someone and they convinced him to go to California with them. And there was nothing the parents could do because they're an adult and they can do what they want. So I think you're always taking the chance that someone will get to your individual that could do something harmful to them or convince them of something. And then you have no rights to really step in and do anything because they can do whatever they want because they're over 18.
Yeah,
So
and
that's a big concern in my mind.
Thank you for explaining that again. Yeah, in his situation, he lives in his own home with 2 other clients, and he's staffed. He's 24/7 care if he's not at work or at a social event. So
There's no way I would go a day
yeah.
without guardianship
Okay.
over my daughter. No way.
Quick question. I bought my daughter her own, like a private home. I have a home. I have it right now in an LLC. But moving forward, should I put it in? What's the best way to handle that?
Is your daughter going to live there, or?
She lives there now.
Do you mean as far as inheritance goes, or what do you
Yes.
mean? I mean, you can put that into her trust, or you can say in your documents that this house, you know, in your revocable trust that you're going to set up, this house will go to your daughter, like to her special needs trust. So if you want that house to go to her, that's what I would do.
Okay, because I already had the trust set up, so I was just kind of wondering
Yeah.
what to go around with
Just
it.
keep it out of her name, but if you want her to have it, make it go to her special needs trust.
Thank you.
All right, I think we have time for one more question.
Thank you. Just actually, I wanted to thank you because I've been to both of your these meetings before, and as a result, did get guardianship and did get an ABLE account. The comment I wanted to make for the other parents in the room: the ABLE accounts are super easy to set up, really simple. I mean, I thought it was very simple. We were able to get a debit card for my son, who's 30, and one for myself. I keep his card, but when he comes home, he gets to feel independent and use his debit card, which he likes. The other thing I wanted to mention is he lives in a group home in another state, and guardianship for us, we had to file in the state in which he resides. So if I went to all these webinars and all these seminars in Atlanta, I'm in Georgia, and everything that I learned did not apply to obtain guardianship for him in South Carolina. So just a heads up if anybody else is in that situation. I know it's a little bit rare, but FYI.
Hi, thank you. So I'm one of the people, I've moved my daughter's 4, we've lived in 3 states since she's been born. For ABLE accounts, if I opened it in one state, but it's because I thought I had to open it in the state we were living in. Now that I know it can be different, is it easy to move? And how do I do that?
Yeah, it's perfectly fine actually to leave it alone. The only reason to move it is if there is a tax advantage or break in that state. But otherwise, it's portable. You can leave it alone. You can move it, look at the options, but it's not anything to be concerned. It's not state-specific in that matter.
Great. All right, we're out of time. So, Lisa, I'll thank you so much. It's very useful information, very helpful. Thank you.